It was supposed to be just another primetime political panel, predictable. Staged, the usual verbal fencing with flashy lower thirds and talking heads trading sound bites like baseball cards. The network had done it 100 times before. Grab a few partisan firebrands, seat them side by side under the warm glare of stage lights. Give them a timer, a buzzer, and just enough provocation to keep the ratings hot. But no one, not even the producers frantically communicating through their earpieces backstage, could have predicted the cultural earthquake that would erupt when Representative Jasmine Crockett squared off with former Trump advisor Kash Patel. What began as a relatively civil debate about oversight and ethics spiraled into a defining moment in modern political media moment that would be clipped, memed, dissected, worshipped, and weaponized across every corner of the digital and real world. And at the center of it stood Crockett, unshaken and razor-sharp, delivering a comeback so devastating, so precisely timed, and so rich with unfiltered authenticity that it didn't just silence Patel, it detonated his credibility and left a live studio audience utterly breathless. The tension was already simmering beneath the surface. Patel, ever the pugnacious operator, entered the conversation with the smug assurance of someone who had grown used to dominating weekly moderated segments. From his first few answers, it was clear he came to provoke. He interrupted, scoffed, and waved off opposing arguments with a practiced smirk that oozed condescension. When Jasmine Crockett responded to his first jab with calm precision, he doubled down, using dismissive language and gesturing toward her with faux concern, an old tactic designed to bait. "Congresswoman," he said with a syrupy tone of mockery, "you might want to revisit the Constitution before you come for people who actually serve this country." The audience gave a low gasp. The host tried to redirect, but Crockett had already sat up straighter in her chair. Her eyes locked on Patel's, and the air in the studio changed. She let a beat of silence hang enough time for everyone to sense that something was coming. Then, with a voice as steady as a scalpel, she cut in with what would become the most quoted sentence of the year. "Cash. The only thing you ever served was spin, and America's already choking on it." The room erupted. Gasps, claps stunned. Silence, followed by chaotic applause. The host tried to move on, but it was useless. The panel had just witnessed a political kill shot in real time. It wasn't just the word "zit," was how she said them. Calm, unflinching, precise. Crockett didn't lean into volume or theatrics. She didn't shout him down or throw a tantrum. Instead, she delivered her line like a surgeon wielding a scalpel, clean, clinical, and irreversible. She managed to reduce Patel's entire rhetorical posture, his bravado, his deflections, his carefully constructed image as the unshakable loyalist to Ash. The look on Patel's face was worth 1,000 opides. He blinked, visibly rattled, mouth twitching as he struggled to assemble a response that would neutralize the blow. But there was no rebuttal that could touch what had just happened. It wasn't a debate anymore. It was a reckoning. The audience, made up of undecided voters and media professionals alike, had just witnessed something rare. Truth breaking through. Noise. Within seconds, producers backstage were flooded with texts and notifications. Cameras captured audience members exchanging shocked glances, jaws hanging, eyebrows raised. One man in the front row whispered, "Did she just end him?" She had. By the time the segment wrapped, the energy in the studio had shifted completely. Patel, once cocky and animated, sat stiffly, responding to further questions with a defensiveness that betrayed the blow he'd suffered. Crockett, on the other hand, seemed even more composed, almost bored by the gamesmanship around her. She didn't celebrate her line or revel in its virality. She simply returned to her arguments, citing statutes and precedent with the ease of someone who didn't need viral fame to justify her seat at the table. But the internet wasn't going to let the moment pass quietly. Within minutes of airing, the clip had been sliced, captioned, and uploaded across every major platform. Twitter exploded with hashtags like #CrockettClapsBack, #SpinServedCold, and #JasmineSmash. TikTok creators reenacted the moment with lip syncs, commentary, and edits over cinematic music. Even politicians took notice. Several Democratic leaders privately texted Crockett messages of admiration. while conservative influencers scrambled to spin the moment as an example of rudeness or disrespect. But the public wasn't buying it. Polls released the next day showed a surge in recognition for Jasmine Crockett among young voters, independents, and women of color. One political strategist was quoted saying, "That moment didn't just embarrass Kash, Patel introduced a new political force." In the 24 hours that followed Jasmine Crockett's now iconic takedown of Kash Patel, the media ecosystem reacted like a dropped beehive. Networks scrambled to get replays of the clip up across all digital platforms, morning shows lead, with the moment framing it in tones that ranged from shocked reverence to opportunistic exploitation. Political shows on both ends of the spectrum debated its implications, not just as a verbal victory, but as a symbol of something much deeper in exposure of the brittle, hollow facade so often propped up by talking point warriors like Patel. The fact that one sentence could cut through the armor of deflection so cleanly and in real time, in front of a live studio audience, forced even the most jaded observers to reckon with a truth few dared speak. Authenticity was winning again. Crockett didn't just win an argument. She ripped a hole in the narrative fabric Patel and his ilk had spent years weaving. The wound wasn't going to close anytime soon, as social media took the moment and ran with it. Even those who typically avoided political content found themselves watching and rewatching the clip. It became one of those rare flashpoints that transcended tribal allegiances. Liberals cheered, conservatives tried to regroup, centrists paused to listen. Crockett's takedown had all the ingredients of a viral juggernaut: wit, composure, timing, and the unmistakable undercurrent of justice, delivered without pomp or overacting. It was the kind of moment that bypassed punditry and hit the emotional cortex of the public like a truth missile. The way she leaned back in her chair afterward, calm and unmoved, as if to say, "I didn't come to play, I came to end delusions," only deepened the legend. Patel's silence afterward, as the camera panned awkwardly to him for a reaction, spoke louder than any words he could have fumbled through. It was the silence of defeat, a man suddenly aware he'd stepped into an arena he wasn't ready for. Behind closed doors, the political class took note. Democratic strategists, often hungry for someone who could spar with both intellect and unshakable calm, found a new heroine in Jasmine Crockett. She was young but seasoned, principled yet not preachy, and had the rare ability to skewer her opponent. Without becoming the caricature the media so often painted of angry women in politics, she was surgical, not chaotic, confident, not arrogant. And most importantly, she didn't grandstand, she eviscerated. Patel's defenders attempted rapid response tactics, calling her divisive, accusing her of being performative. But the words bounced off her like dull pebbles against steel. The public wasn't interested in spin. They'd seen the raw footage. They had watched a man once portrayed as an architect of shadowy political influence get neutralized in a single breath. Any attempts to rewrite that narrative felt forced and transparent. Conservative media, sensing the futility of defending Patel, began shifting the spotlight. The less they talked about the moment, the better. But it was already too late. Crockett's words had entered the zeitgeist, a cultural phrase now spoken casually among students, activists, even late-night comedians who usually avoided taking jabs at former Trump allies. Everyone wanted in on the moment. Meanwhile, Crockett herself remained surprisingly disengaged from the circus. No late-night appearances, no victory lap, no headline-grabbing interviews. Instead, she returned to her legislative work, issuing a short statement that simply read, "The truth doesn't need volume, just needs a platform." That phrase alone became a rallying cry for a younger generation, increasingly disillusioned with partisan theatrics and longing for realness. Across college campuses, her line was quoted in classrooms and student senate speeches. Activists printed it on t-shirts. High school debaters used it as their opening salvo. And in the midst of all this, Kash Patel seemed to evaporate from the spotlight. Scheduled appearances were canceled. Invitations to roundtables quietly disappeared. Rumors swirled that his advisors had warned him against further media exposure for the time being. "You can't bounce back from that overnight," one anonymous aide confessed to a journalist. That wasn't just a political loss, it was personal exposure. The kind people don't forget. The fallout reached even further than Patel's. Public standing. Donors who had once supported him as a possible candidate for future office began to reconsider. If he can't handle Jasmine Crockett, how's he going to handle a Senate race? One influential donor reportedly said. Meanwhile, Crockett's fundraising numbers surged, and her campaign began fielding offers from national consultants, who previously wouldn't return a call. In a single sentence, she had redefined not just her own brand, but the dynamics of what counted as political capital in the modern age. Intelligence mattered again. Composure mattered again. And most critically, truth delivered without apology was back in fashion. The media, always ready to coronate a new star, tried to package her as the new face of a political movement, but Crockett refused the label. "I'm not trying to be a symbol," she said in a rare follow-up interview. "Just not going to let people lie with a straight face and think silence makes them right."